Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. So we have all the results in from Standard, Pioneer, Modern, and Legacy from the Ikoria cards being introduced into the various formats. And it seems that this is going to be one of the most impactful sets in a long time. And that is saying something when we both had Euro from Theros and we had a bunch of the cards from Throne of Eldraine that impacted all of the formats. So I don't know what's going on with the design team as well as a playtest team over at Wizards of the Coast, but they are missing some glaring obvious problems with some of these new design cards. And they keep trying to push cards that either work with not traditionally casting them with companions, or if you have like Euro from being able to cast from the graveyard and not putting enough restrictions on those cards, or just by trying to go against the natural curve, meaning to have other ways to cast stuff. So think of cards like Fires of Invention or Wilderness Reclamation, or now we have Gyruda out of the Ikoria that are just breaking the way that people have built decks. So we're going to go over in this video the top 10 cards that have impacted the various formats from Ikoria. And I'm not going to include any of the support cards. So, I mean, we have like the Heartless Act that could go on this list that is seeing quite a bit of play because it's one of the best removal spells printed in a long time. We're just going to look at cards that have created their own archetypes and are seeing a lot of play in multiple formats. And I don't think any of these cards are just in one format. We see them throughout many formats in Magic: The Gathering. So we're also going to be looking at cards that surround these cards to see for potential specs. There are some cards that are, of course, going to be bought out immediately, and maybe we've missed the boat on some of them, but there will be some of them that will lag behind, and there will be some pretty decent investment opportunities for those when this hits paper and people have to pick up the pieces to create these various decks. So without further ado, let's get started in the top 10 list of cards that have impacted the Magic: The Gathering 1v1 format. So let's start off with an honorable mention. This is the Ozolith. So the Ozolith is actually seeing a lot of play in Pioneer and Modern in the robots or affinity builds because it's a neat little card with Arcbound Ravager, and it's also pretty decent for if you want to be able to put counters. So whenever creature control leaves the battlefield, if it had counters on it, put those counters on the Ozolith. So if one of your creatures with counters on it ends up dying, you can actually just switch them over to Ozolith, and then for Pioneer, just then move them onto a newly cast Walking Ballista. That's the kind of the combo they're running in Pioneer. And then in Modern, in this Arcbound Ravager, you can sack everything to the Arcbound Ravager, then throw it even on the Ozolith, and then move it over in the future. So the Inkmoth Nexus activation later on can be used with the Ozolith to then swing in for lethal. So it gives it another little punch, a more evasive punch for the deck. And we did see many finishes in the Modern Challenge, and we'll be scrolling through this later on. You'll see as I scroll through these particular decks. So I just want to give this an honorable mention because it didn't really spawn a new archetype. It's just been slotted in, and it is usually like a one or a two of in the deck. It is a legendary artifact, so you don't want multiples. Modern, it's a little bit easier because you can just sack the Ozolith to Arcbound Ravager to get a counter if you have a multiple one in your hand. But it's just a nice little angle that these affinity builds now have to give them a little bit more staying power. All right, so on to number 10, this is Slither Wisp. So Slither Wisp has spawned a new archetype in Standard. I haven't seen it much outside of Standard, but I do think it's powerful enough in the entire, like in Pioneer, there already is a black blue flash deck I think that could utilize Slither Wisp with like Torrential Gearhulks, and there are a few other cards with flash on them. There are plenty of cards in flash right now in Standard. That's what I always like to joke about Standard. There's very little interaction because everything has flash and haste and you know, hexproof, all these things that go against being able to interact and normally play the 1, 2, 3, 4 turn curve where you're tit for tat. That's kind of why I still like Pauper. A little bit of a side note, because Pauper does still seem to be where you play the most Magic these days, where Modern and Pioneer have gone towards more degenerate decks, and Standard's incredibly unfair or degenerate right now comparatively to Standards of yesteryears. So Slither Wisp has spawned a black-blue flash deck, and there are a few other pieces that do go in that deck, but this is the one that seems to be the most consistent in that, as it says, it's a 3/2 flash, and whenever you cast another spell that has flash, you draw a card and each opponent loses 1 life. So it's pretty Neat little card there to both gain a lot of card advantage, which is exactly what flash decks want. And there are a few other cards in the flash decks that also allow you to gain card advantage, like the Brazen Borrower and the Octopus, we'll be talking about later, that work perfectly with this card to give you that card advantage. You're just going to be taking care of all of your opponent's threats and getting there in for little bits of increments of damage with guys like this dude. So the Wisp, I think, is here to stay. It's the flash archetype for black-blue is alive and well, and I think that blue-green and blue-red are also pretty well positioned, and we'll look at the card that's tying that together in a second. All right, on to the next one. This is Shark Typhoon. Shark Typhoon is going into various decks right now. Mainly it is being slotted into blue-white control in the sideboard. I've actually seen this in the main as well, as it feels almost like a Hydrocrisis Light. You're not going to get the life off of it, but you're going to draw a card and put out a threat. And so if you're just spending 4 mana, it's the same thing you'd get out of a Hydrocrisis. You're going to get a 2/2 flying creature and draw a card, which isn't bad, but at instant speed as well. And then if you actually have the 6 mana to throw the Shark Typhoon out, then all of your spells, all of your absorbs are going to be putting out threats, which is exactly what a blue-white control deck wants to do. Another one I've seen this in is in the sideboards, or I've actually seen it in the main of the Fae of Wishes, Fires of Invention decks. So this is another card that can then be cheated out of Fires of Invention, then you start casting cards, and it's at least going to put you out even more threats per turn. It's also another way, if your Fires of Invention does get solved, then you still have the Shark Typhoon that later on, all of your cards, all of your Planeswalkers, it says non-creature spell, all of your Planeswalkers will create blue shark creature tokens with flying, and it is going to overwhelm your opponent quite quickly in those particular decks. So Shark Typhoon I did see in a few other besides Standard, because the cycling just really pushes this over the top by making this always a useful card. You can just cycle away for 2 and even get a 0/0 out at that point. All right, so next one we have is mainly for Standard, but I've seen a few other decks hit in Pioneer and Modern. This is Rail the Everwise. Rail the Everwise is breathing new life in the Arclight Phoenix deck. So this one states it gets +1/+0 for each insert sorcery card in your graveyard, and whenever you discard 1 or more cards, for the first time you draw that many cards. So it's pretty decent for like Cathartic Reunion type cards where you're ditching 2 cards, or any wheel type effect where you're wheeling them away and then you can draw those cards instead. And what makes this pretty good is it doesn't have evasion, but it's very similar to the Crackling Drake with the amount of power that it can burst out, and it comes out a turn earlier. However, it does still die to 3 damage spells, which are prevalent in Standard. So you're going to use this mainly just to get as much value out of it as possible. If your opponents do take care of the threat, then you're going to rely on like your Arclight Phoenixes to finish off the game. It doesn't quite have to even go into Arclight Phoenix decks. I've seen it in just other blue-red tempo-based decks, as there are a lot of synergies in the format. We had Thrill of Thirst for Meaning that was just printed. You have Torment of Voice, you have Cathartic Reunion, you have the discard cards out of the Guilds of Ravnica. So if nothing else, you're drawing a card every time you use those particular cards, and gives a lot of much needed oomph to those type of strategies. Next up, we have a card that's really just come out in Force, which is Winota, Joiner of Forces. This has seen an entire Standard deck do quite well because it can do some very degenerate things on turn number 4. So Winota states whenever a non-human creature you control attacks, you look at the top 6 cards of your library and put a human creature card from among them on the battlefield tapped and attacking. It gains Indestructible. And so the main thing that people are doing with this is cards like Raise the Alarms or Chandra, curving into 2 tokens that are non-human tokens that are attacking. And then you at that point, you're going through 12 cards. You're probably going to hit an Agent of Treachery. So Agent of Treachery is then going to steal a permanently from your opponent, and it's really going to put you ahead at that point. So this is a card that comes down. They have to take care of it right before the combat phase, which is kind of tough on a 4 toughness creature when you have like Lava Coil that's a sorcery speed card, and some of the other cards that people are using currently to take care of cards that are weaker at that point. There's also some neat little Naya decks I've seen coming out that this can go around counter magic with the flash decks with the I think it's a Dryad that makes your cards uncounterable, your creature spells uncounterable, and it's also a non-human, so it's got double synergy there with Winota. So I think that it's a matter of time before Pioneer will breed a deck with this one, because right now in Standard we actually don't have the greatest amount of humans that are really wanting to be cheated into play, but we do have the Agent of Treachery, which is still one of the better cards at the moment to be cheated out even in Pioneer. Stealing a permanent card permanently is pretty good for 4 mana, and they still have to take care of that threat later on, which is a 2/3. And then if you have any other blink effects that I've even seen a few other of the decks run, then you can blink it and then get another permanent. Yeah, pretty silly with this card, being able to really cheat out converted mana costs for high casting cost human creatures. All right, so then we go on to the next one, and this is Sea Dasher Octopus. So this is the blue flash cards that is really putting the other archetypes in competition here, because it was kind of what the blue flash decks were missing, is like the Curious Obsession was really good in a blue flash deck beforehand. With that rotating out, the just mono blue decks had a tough time keeping up with card advantage. Well, Sea Dasher Octopus solves that. If you're in blue-green flash, the Sea Dasher Octopus can be able to be flashed in on a Cutthroat or just on the 1/1 flyer, and it's going to give you a residual, or just flashing itself, and it's going to give you that residual card draw, so you can keep drawing your counter spells and your bounce spells and make quick work of your opponent. Same thing with the blue-red style flash, where it's going to be a great card just to flash in and continue to get you those either burn spells or bounce spells or all the good stuff that red has to offer. And it has a lot of good synergy with like the Cutthroat and the 1/1 Flying Pirate, as those are going to be flash cards as well, and it slots into that blue-black flash deck that we were talking about earlier. So this is seeing a lot of play. I've even seen it in other, besides Standard, as it has just the right converted mana cost, and the mutate's just on par. I think there will be a matter of time before we actually see a mutate deck that's pretty decent too, and this is actually I think it is the cheapest mutate cost in the game at the moment with 2. So it'll be a way to enable those mutate cards that do something when they mutate. All right, and an instant speed, so keep that in mind. All right, on to the next one, which is Bosh, the Prey Piercer. So Bosh is seeing a lot of play in Pioneer, especially in the red green elf stack. So this is where you're ramping into like the Lovestruck Beasts and the Legion Loyalists and the those type of cards. So going 1 to 3. So 1 to 3 to 5 curve is pretty decent with those, because it's just a companion you can run from your sideboard, and then it doubles the damage, which is pretty good with like a Lovestruck Beast that's attacking for 10 damage instead. You have to run all converted mana costs that are even, but that's still like Glorybringer, odd. So you don't get to run, I believe you don't get to run Embercleave, right? Because Embercleave is 6. I can't remember these converted mana costs, but you still get the like Glorybringer's got a lot of good synergy with Bosh, and same with all like the Legion Loyalists and the Lovestruck Beasts and all those type of cards that are going to go wide and have big bodies themselves. So also seeing play in Standard, so some of the Rakdos Sacrifice decks are choosing to play Bosh rather than the Loras, as you can still run the Devil, the Mayhem Devil, and then you just go 1 to 3 in that deck. So you kind of skip your evens, so no Priest, but you can still run the Witch's Oven and the Cauldron Familiar, and still run some of the 2/1s and some other the good 1-drops, and then just go into the 3-drops. And it's still, there's enough cards to actually make that work. You still get Claim, the Firstborn, can work in the strategy. So Bosh the Prey Piercer is seeing a lot of play. And I've even seen some modern decks that are putting this in the sideboard too, just going to the 1-3-5 curve as well. All right, on to the next one, which is seeing a lot of play in Modern, Pioneer, Standard, even Legacy decks have shown this, which is Sprite Dragon. So Sprite Dragon is a permanent prowess. Flying Haste, 1/1 for 2 mana. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you put a +1/+1 counter on Sprite Dragon. It gets more degenerate in older formats because you're like Lotus Petals can give this +1/+1, or you're in Modern, you can have your Baubles. So your 0-drop artifacts will give this a permanent +1/+1 counter. So we've seen like Death Shadows decks that are running Sprite Dragon as in the iteration, because they're casting a lot of stuff, and you're going to get a lot of +1/+1 counters on it. Same thing with Pioneer. There are plenty of things, ops and whatnot, that will get this big very quickly. And then in Standard, it is going in like the blue-red flash decks, as well as going in just the Phoenix, the Arclight Phoenix decks, as you're going to be casting a lot of spells. And this is going to be another threat that preemptively comes out before the Phoenixes that they have to take care of, and then your Phoenixes can really grind out the game. So I was very surprised to see this in all 4 of the formats, Legacy, Modern, Standard, and Pioneer. And it seems to be the real deal. Flying is and the permanent +1 counters are giving the Sonata over some of the other iterations. We have like a 2/2 haste prowess card with flying from not too long ago. I think it's still in standard. It has been passed up. People just don't play it, and the permanent is the key here, as this card gets very, very big very quickly. All right, now we're getting onto the really, really good stuff that has affected formats. The first one is the Gyruda Doom of Depths. So this card is just doing insane stuff in Legacy. They're turn 1, so basically the combo with Gyruda in Legacy is going to be the cards like Lotus, Petal, and the Chrome Mox, and then Lion's Eye Diamond, and Ancient Tomb, and City of Traders. So basically, with the new London Mulligan rule, you can mulligan. You have 4 mulligans to try to find a Lion's Eye Diamond, an Ancient Tomb, and just one other mana-producing card. And then you can cast Gyruda and hopefully don't whiff. And if you find any flicker effects in the top 4, you can keep going until you eventually find something that gives your creatures haste and then swing in for lethal. There are some other iterations in Modern and in Pioneer that do the same stuff. Standard actually doesn't have a lot of cards that work the greatest with Gyruda, but there is enough that do work. We have the Spark Double, which is the key card that works with Gyruda Doom of Depths. And you still have like Charming Prince that will flicker it. And you have a few other flicker cards. Like Thassa is an even mana cost card, so you can still go through your entire deck with the right hits with Gyruda Doom of Depths. Of course, it does get much better with the other older formats because there are plenty of other copy-based effects in those formats and not so many right now in Standard. But yeah, this card is just completely busted with anything that ramps into it, and people are complaining about this card like crazy in Legacy, calling for this be the first card that is banned from the new Ikoria layer of the Behemoths. However, I'd argue that there is one card that is much better than Gyruda that is, I think, should be banned. We'll get to that in a second. Next one, I have this one highly. This one actually should have been back further. I forgot to reorder. This is Narset of the Ancient Way. I thought I'd mention this one because it has bred a new life into the Jeskai Planeswalkers build, and I've actually seen 4-color Planeswalkers, so like Narset into Nicol Bolas is pretty good. And it's pretty easy to go 4 colors right now, especially when we have the mana fixing with the new cards that come out, the new cycling cards, and you have the old school one that allows you to cast any mana for Planeswalkers. And this has also really put the Jeskai Fires decks over the top, because it's exactly what Jeskai Fires wants on their turn 4. So typically right now, you go Jeskai Fires into like a Sphinx, or like a Brazen Borrower or a Bone Crusher Giant, which is like not ideal for a card. Most of the cards you want to hit for Jeskai Fires is going to be your 5-drops. However, Narset is exactly what the deck wants to curve into. So going Teferi into Fires of Invention into Narset is very, very strong, because then you get to draw a card, discard a card. Typically, you get to discard something that is not necessary at this point, like an extra Kenrith, and actually kill a threat. And then you'll be able to protect your Narset. You'll kill the threat. Afterwards, the gaining 2 life is not that great, but you can immediately do the -2 again and take care of another threat next turn. So it's a 2-for-1 card, and then after, it's setting you up with the draw card with Fires of Invention, which makes you be able to keep some more laxed hands than you normally would, and find exactly that combo with the Kenrith or the Cavalier for that turn 5 lethal play. So Narset is really, really strong in that Jeskai Fires deck, and yeah, I think that Jeskai Fires is going to be a very, very annoying deck until Teferi rotates out, because Teferi is one of those cards that really puts Jeskai Fires in position to be able to... Oh, another card that was added into this was the other companion, where you have to have converted mana cost 3 or greater, and so it gives you a card that you automatically can have with your Jeskai Fires, again, allowing you to keep even looser hands. So between those two, I guess in the same package, that this Narset and I can't remember the card off the top of my head, are really pushing Jeskai Fires. All right, so now we have the most impactful card of the set by far. It's in every format, all 4 formats, and it is very representative. It's taken over Pioneer, it's taken over Standard, it's actually seeing lots of play in Modern, and this is Loras. I am on the ban train. This card needs to be banned as soon as possible. It is completely broken. I've seen this in non-creature based decks, just to have a creature, might as well, and throwing in like a couple permanents here and there to get the value out of Loras. Something even like a Mishra's Bauble, where you can just keep casting every turn and drawing a card every turn with Loras, and then just grinding out your opponent. And I've seen it in just tons and tons of decks in Pioneer, where they're running like auras, so it's going in kind of the auras base strategy. It's pushed over the top, and then in standard, it has really pushed the Aristocrats deck into a, if it already wasn't tier 1, it was tier 1 before, but really the deck to beat right now. And it just allows you to just really grind out your opponent. The thing is, you can still run cards like Gruesome Menandry, or the new card out of the set that allows you to put in up to 2 creatures with a converted mana cost total of 3, because it says it only needs permanent cards with 2 or less. So you can still run reanimate based cards to get Loras back reanimated and then get your engine back going. There's some pretty gross stuff that this can do with the Priest, that allows you to sacrifice creatures, because it just continues to give you that, like I said, the residual gas every turn to deal with your opponent. You have the creatures that discard cards when they come into play. You have creatures that can do damage when they die and take care of threats. There are so many things that Loras is just busted with, and I think this card is going to be a problem. There are some ways to really hamper the effect of Loras the Dream Den. One of those is Grafdigger's Cage. That is pretty good. And we'll be talking about cards. I think on my second channel, we'll go over it more about the cards that I think are going to go up. Yeah, so I'm going to cut this video short after this. We're not going to really look at the cards that go with these particular ones, but you can head over to my other channel over the Rogue Market. I'm going to give you 10 cards that work with these cards that I think are poised to go up in price, because of people either, trying to counter them, or they're going to be slotted into those decks that actually go with them. But Loras is just all over the place. Back to Modern. Modern is with Death Shadow is very, very good. It allows you to continue to recast the Death Shadows, and like Monstrous Swift Spears. There are like Tarmogoyf decks where Loras can just continue to cast Goyfs back from the graveyard. And it's just a very obnoxious card because it's always in your hand, or basically always in your hand at the start of the game. And it allows you to keep some pretty light hands. And I don't see a format where this card isn't going to be broken. Post-rotation, there will be plenty of cards that work with it. Yeah, so I'm on the ban trade with Loras. It's just too strong. It's going to hamper the deck diversity, as this one is just going to be slotted into so many decks. And then we still have the problem with where I've seen non-creature based decks actually just run this as in the sideboard as, like I said, throw in a couple of artifacts that cantrip, or throw in a couple things that, they can just get you value. And there's some value engine, and then you can just run a bunch of non-creature permanents and then grind your way to a victory. So not a big fan of this card. I think it was poorly designed. I don't know how in the world it actually made through playtest before. It took the internet seconds to realize how busted it was, and another second to break it. So it's funny when people are talking about like the Luminous as the best card in the set, and yeah, this one I can't believe. Yeah, I guess it always was pretty expensive, but yeah, there's no format where this wouldn't just, even standards, you could take any set. You could take a block set, and I think you'd find enough cards to just really make this card pretty broken. Like even look at like cards like what's the Goblin, where it can sacrifice itself to do 2 damage. That's pretty nutty. And this card is definitely just too much of a value train in one card, especially when it's a free card. Just taking a sideboard slot. So there you have it again of the cards that I think are the most impactful, and we'll take a look at deck lists that go with this in future videos. The Ozlith for Affinity Robots, Wisp for the Black-Blue Flash, the Shark Typhoon for Blue-White Control, the Rail, the Everwise for the Blue-Red discard-based decks like Arclight Phoenix, the Winota Joiner of the Forges with Agent of Treachery, the Sea Dasher Octopus for Blue Flash, or all the Blue Flash variants, the Bosh the Prey Piercer for mainly Pioneer Green, Red Stompy with the Lovestruck Beast type decks, and the Sprite Dragon for the Blue-Red Tempo-based decks, Gyruda for just the busted Legacy, and it's a pretty decent deck in Standard, beats the other mid-range mirrors in Standard, and then we have Narset for Fires of Invention, and Loras is just a broken card. So all the cards that actually work around these ones, I think are pretty good investments if they're lagging behind. And again, in the future iterations of this, we'll take another look, maybe a part 2 of this, and look at the cards that actually do work with these cards and are lagging behind and are poised to go up. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Head over to my Rogue Market channel and see the part 2 of this video. Thanks for watching.